Kenny Everett was a legend in the world of broadcasting, but in 1970 he was sacked from Radio 1. He hit rock bottom and his career seemed to be over, until he was thrown an unlikely lifeline.
I am a magnificent K-E-double-N. Wow! Yes, friends, it's your very own Cuddly Ken back on the BBC. It's disgusting. Suddenly, through the barrage of red tape, came me.
It was an amazing coup at the time, but it wasn't altogether popular with the senior management of the BBC.
Somebody like Ken was like a mad little imp, causing great joy for the listeners and not a little worry for the men in suits.
The voice of Radio 1, just for fun. Music.
Kenny Everett was in the original lineup of DJs when Radio 1 started up in 1967. Then 3 years later, he was sacked. A joke about the Transport Minister's wife was the last straw.
He was devastated. He really was, because the BBC, the Beeb, it was his idea of heaven. I think he'd like to have been dead. He was so devastated, he was just on the floor. I was always good at picking him up, because he was oversensitive anyway, but that was the worst thing that I ever saw him through.
The following year, here at the BBC in Bristol, the youngest local radio manager in the country was grappling with a difficult task. How do you attract a bigger audience to a fledgling radio station? His star presenter was Don Moss. He did a very popular Saturday show, but he wanted to take 4 weeks off to go on holiday.
And I wasn't sure what to do, and then I suddenly thought, Kenny Everett's available. So I thought, let's have a go. So I rang him up.
Was it a bit of a risky roll of the dice taking on Kenny Everett?
When you're 26, you don't think too deeply about such things. I just saw an opportunity to indulge in a nice piece of public relations with a performer who'd been sacked by the BBC and was, in my view, a genius.
The news soon reached the corridors of power at Broadcasting House in London, and David picked up the phone to hear the stern voice of the BBC's managing director of radio, Ian Trethowan.
He said, we have a file, and it says on the file that he must not be taken on by anybody in the BBC without reference upwards. Why did you disobey this file? So I said, well, I didn't even know it was there. Well, he said, well, you know now, so what are you going to do about it? I said, put him on the air. He said, if this goes wrong, be it on your own head. Put the phone down.
Radio Bristol is the station with the jolliest DJ.
We had a young lady on our staff at Radio Bristol who was a toughie.
Kenny Everett is the name of this particular DJ.
She was steely. I was confident that she could say no to anybody, certainly to Kenny Everett if he were to go off the rails.
Taking over from Don Moss, it's the Cuddly Ken Show.
I remember this terrible moment. David looked round the sort of group of aghast people and said, Kate, you're the producer.
Although David's BBC career was already on the line, he invited the national papers and the TV crew to announce the controversial signing. The question is, would Kenny behave?
Tomorrow I've got to go and do a press reception for my triumphant return to the BBC. They're putting me on Radio Bristol for 4 hours at £12.10 an hour.
Oh, and there you are.
Oh, this was nervous stuff.
Don't you feel, that you've been in some way browbeaten into coming back because this is the only outlet in radio in this country, the corporation?
No, I don't feel strange about my dismissal. It got a hell of a lot of publicity. I've never been in the Daily Mirror more in my life. Or the Sun. No, I look upon Radio Bristol as a cuddly little radio station that I'll be able to groove on, you see.
For how long?
4 weeks.
From our newsroom, dear Ken, please come back to Radio 1. It's not the same without you. If you don't come back, I know I'll have to do something desperate, like running into Woolworths and shouting, Marks and Spencer! So please come back. Yours faithfully, Kenny Everett.
He used to put in the most enormous amount of preparation to his programmes. And I had said to him, I'm your producer. And he said, please yourself. So I lived off it for years, saying I was Kenny Everett's producer. In fact, I was his tea lady.
Hello. How are you? Wonderful to see you.
After nearly half a century, David is meeting up again with Kenny's ex-wife, Lee. Kenny and Lee were married for over 10 years and lived in a farmhouse in Sussex,
Petal Cottage.
where Kenny would spend hours in his home recording studio making jingles and other creations for his radio shows.
Which disc jockey would be complete without a music room? And here's mine, in which much music is to be heard.
I look high, I look low, I'm looking everywhere I go, looking for a home in the heart of the country.
They'd really warned him so many times. You know, they kept saying, no, you can't do that, Kenny, you're on the BBC.
I went to see the Director General the other day.
You did, sir?
Oh, yes. Very good friend of mine, the old Durgeon, you know.
Did he think he was invulnerable?
No, he was just mad.
I've often wondered, after 46 years, what happened when I made that call. I said, how do you fancy a few shows on BBC Radio Bristol?
I think he was a bit shocked, you know, that he could be hired by a section of the BBC, you know. But I mean, for me, it was brilliant. We had just got our first mortgage, you know, so we were really in it up to there. And so that you saved our life in a funny way.
Miracle Glock! Yes, friend, Glock is good for bunions.
Lee had realised that she could syndicate the programmes and sell them to other BBC local radio stations.
In the end, we were just posting them out, just, you know, putting them on the train. It was complete lunacy. He used everything in my kitchen for sound effects.
Excuse me, sir.
I'd heard going on in the studio, and it was my tea towels all being ripped to shreds. In the end, I started locking things up. I should have locked him up, actually, if I'd have been sensible.
Eventually, the couple split up, and Kenny came out as gay, but they remained good friends. And Kenny was best man at Lee's wedding to actor John Olkin from The Sweeney.
All it takes is for Radio Bristol to stick a little twiddly bit on their transmitter and you can get in stereo. Mind you have to walk about with two radios. Meanwhile, on Radio Bristol...
Ken was clearly both wild and mad and sparky and also very thoughtful. You heard little edited bits of tape, bits of music, including classical music, what he used to call the tuneful bits. And he'd meld them into this extraordinary, continuous string of fun, music, jokes, quirky remarks. He was hugely, hugely gifted.
Hold everything!
Kenny went on to enormous national success.
It's all done in the best possible taste!
In 1995, he died of an HIV-related illness. He was 50. As for David Wayne, he went on to be a senior manager in the BBC.
I'm still very proud of my contact with Kenny Everett, and I still love the clips that come up on the television and the little jingles you hear on the radio. The Cleo Rockers and the Rod Stewart sketch. And his all in the best possible taste.